to be true, the happier they are about the institution overall. What's even more interesting about this is it's a learned experience for your alumni, more so than we see even for a lot of other schools. Sometimes it changes around. For you, it's pretty clean. In other words, the longer I've been away, the more likely I am to understand that that's true, which means for you all, there's a big opportunity to help accelerate that learning curve. By finding these stories where people say, I didn't get it when I was 20, 30, 40, 50, but I really understand now how when X, Y, Z happened to me while I was a student, it really is foundational to a lot of success I've had. Not just in career, but in engaging with my community and other things. There's a trustee at a school, small private school in Texas. When I presented these findings, he came up after the meeting and he said, you know, it's interesting that you put that and you put about telling the story, because when I was a student here, my goal was to be a chemist. I wanted to go work for a chemical company. My dad worked for a chemical company. That's what a lot of people in Texas do. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to study chemistry. And it always annoyed me that the school made me take English classes and psychology classes and all these other classes. I thought that was just terrible. Why am I doing this? It's a waste of time. I want to be a chemist. I want to study math. I want to study science. He said I did it, and when I finished, all the science and math helped me a lot as I moved up through the ranks in various chemical companies. He said the difference is now I run a chemical company. I'm the guy in charge. And for the last 10 years, I've been in senior management in chemical companies. And as it turns out, the things that service me best at this stage in my life are all those other classes I took. And I'm a trustee and a donor to this institution because I want to make sure that they don't listen to people like me when I was a student. That I want to make sure that those things, but there's all kinds of those stories. I hear older alumni all the time, all over the country say, best money I ever spent was getting that degree at. Because it's the foundation. It's the thing that let them make other choices in their life. What you want to do is find those stories and push them down to try to accelerate that learning curve. So what do they like to read? Well, the magazine's at the top of the list. You can see email, website. The only thing that you're kind of running the other direction on is they'd like to hear a little bit more from their departments. A little more email, a little more communication from their departments. What's interesting, though, on this is your older alumni across the board say, you're knocking my socks off in all the communications. Your younger alumni are saying, not maybe. But I'm the one that want to hear a little bit more about, I want some more email on this. What's happening here? Invitations to university activities. You know, the people least likely to attend your events, you know who they are? Your youngest alumni. Yet they're the ones saying, please disregard the fact that I'm not coming to your stuff and invite me anyway. So there's an opportunity there. Now, it comes up again in a minute, but I'll explain it a little bit here. We refer to it as the paradox of event attendance. So we know, there's been enough schools have done enough research, we know if you get somebody to attend an event, you have in fact increased the probability that person's going to give to your alma mater. If they attend more events, they're probably going to give more. Now, not everybody that attends gives, but there is a clear correlation, and it always shows up at any school that has the data to actually look at it. That's the good news. Any thoughts on the bad news of the same issue? Almost all your alumni are never going to show up at one of your events. It is not. The overwhelming majority of your alumni aren't going to show up with events, which is why if you've been to an event and there's 20 or 50 people there, have you ever asked yourself, why are we spending money on this? There's only 20 people here. We have 115,000 alumni. How is this making a difference? And the answer, if you actually articulate it, the answer is going to be, because that's the path. That's how you get people to begin to think about being a giver, that there are these connections that matter. There's a bigger point, and you'll see it in several slides this afternoon, but it starts right here. It starts with your younger alumni saying, don't pay attention to the fact that I'm not coming, invite me anyway. I want to know my school's that school where stuff happens. That my school has events, that alumni go to events, and that good things happen for alumni who go to the events. And if I ever wanted to, I could plug into that. I remember in 2009 sitting in some hotel watching MSNBC in the morning, getting ready to go to do something. And there was this guy, it was right after the market collapse, remember? Nobody knew how far that market was going to collapse, how devastating the economy was going to suffer from the market collapse. And they had this guy talking head on, and they said, well, if you're in automotive, or if you're in finance, or if you're in real estate, and you've lost your job, or you know you're going to lose your job, what should you do? You know the first thing out of his mouth? Plug into your alumni association. And I think that's a little behind, even though they're not coming, I want to know that I have that my school has this organization. There's things I could plug into. There's something there for me. If we ask them, this is the how often, the frequency question. Folks are more likely to read the magazine than other stuff. You can see that your younger folks are not reading the magazine. It could be a database issue, I don't know. But it's not because young people don't read magazines, don't read their alumni magazine. I know at College of Charleston and University of Missouri that's not true. But the good news for you is it's well offset by your social media. So they are plugging in via social media. This is the Goldilocks question. Do I get too much, not enough, or just the right amount of stuff? And most people say about right on everything. But what's interesting is you got a lot of alumni who send me more email about correspondence to my department. More, you've got almost 50% saying more invitations, presence on social media. You know, they want more of that. So you got a lot of people there that are saying, I want more of those kind of communication. So if you're in a debate, now I'm sure you're getting some, like here, on this email correspondence from the Alumni Association, you still got 20% are saying, give me more. So just because you're getting a few calls that say, I'm getting spam, I don't think that's the case. And we had a good talk this morning with the annual fund and some other folks, and I think they've had other people tell them the same thing. You've got room to be communicating if you're doing the right stuff. If it's about invitations, if it's talking about some of these things that matter to your alumni. You also have about 40% say I get too much solicitations. That's about average. Most schools are at that level or more. You still have over 60% that say it's about right, or even some saying I want more. This one about the credit cards or insurance is a little high. We talked to the communication people earlier about maybe talking about how if you buy, you know, here's Sally and she's got a scholarship and here's some things she's accomplished, and in part that's been paid for because a lot of our alumni buy insurance under the brand of the university, and that money matters. That's money that comes in and helps the institution. Or here's an event that we had, and here's something important that happened at that event, and it's the result of people participating in this program. The other thing about this question, I've had schools ask that question that have never had an affinity program, never planned to have an affinity program, but for whatever reason left the question in the survey. You know what the answer was? Over 20% said way too much or a little too much of that communication. And they never have gotten any. So there's a certain amount, if you just ask me, I'm annoyed because I just don't like any of that mail. So it's not maybe as high as it was. But the other thing, look at this. Your young alumni are the ones saying, give me more invitations. And give me more college-related information, even if it's email, I'm okay with that. As you look at programs, the question we ask is, how important is it that alumni do stuff? And how well does the university support them in doing that? And you can see that a little less energy on some of these than the other folks, but still the big ones for you are identifying job opportunities, ambassadors, mentoring, are the ones that kind of show up in group. But what makes it interesting is that your youngest alumni, again, are leading the charge and saying, I want more stuff. Give more stuff about helps us identify job opportunities for each other. How can we plug into that? How can we have more networking? The hardest people, as I understand, for you all to get to attend an event, a networking event, are your youngest alumni. Yet they're the ones that are saying, yeah, that's important to me, and I wish you'd bring me more. So in a sense what it does, so if you think about an event, and think about that, we talked about that paradox of events. So an event has really two lives. The first life is all about how many people can I get in the door and how can I put on the best possible event, because I know it matters, and I know it matters to those people who attend, and it increases the chances they're going to want to engage in different ways and help the university. That's the first step. After the event's over, that's done. Now it's a whole question of how do I stimulate the communication about this event? How do I spread to the broader population, use the leverage of communication to speak to a broader population about how somebody attended this event and it mattered. It improved their lives somehow. Or alumni attended this event and something happened that helped the alma mater. That those things happen and that it matters and that it's important. So that broader sort of sense of communication about the event may be, in fact, more important than the actual event, depending on what happened and what you find. If you think about it, if all that's true and you accept that, then it's reasonable, or it's at least not unreasonable, to argue that your very smallest event may be the one that's most impactful from the communication standpoint. The smallest event you have is when an alumnus or an alumna walks on this campus. It's also the stealthiest event that you probably do, the most hidden. That's if you have an alumnus or an alumna walk on this campus and guest lecture in somebody's classroom. I'm sure that happens. It happens at schools all over the country, and it doesn't usually get amplified. You know, to the extent you can identify those things, let alumni relations know, set up something where you give something nice to that person, where they get a parking spot, they get an escort when they're on campus. Anything you can do to elevate that, to make that more visible, the better off you are. If you think about you want to get young alumni to be involved, you got to start early. And I think the best way to do that is you want your juniors and seniors at some point in their life on campus to look at an alumnus or an alumna and say, I want to be like her. I want to be like him. Or look at that alumni association on campus supporting them in doing something and say, I want to help that when I get out of here. And to the extent you get that happening, then more young alumni get involved. And one of the ways is sort of elevating the visibility of alumni when they're on campus, make it a difference. And it's not costly to do that, and I think it can make a big difference. If you look at just a list from cultural events, taking a course online, lifelong learning, attend a social event at a bar, this is the litany list of what are the other things that you might come to. Guess what the answer is? If I'm young, I want to come to all of them. Guess who's not coming to any of them? The young alumni. But what they're telling you, I think, very clearly, is talk to me about it. I want to see pictures of the event. I want to know what happened. I want to know that people benefited from it. I want to have some piece of it. And I'm going to want to come. I bet if you could look inside the calendars of all your alumni in their 20s that you invite to an event, you'd be stunned by how many put that event on their calendar and have every intention of going. Until anything comes along that gets a higher priority, and then off it goes. You know, the cat got sick, I'm not going to do it. But I think that they want to. They want to know it's there. They like to know it's there. And so I think then that puts the pressure on the communication side. Why don't they come to your events? It's about time, don't know anyone, geographic distance, but this one's interesting. If you split this into in-state versus out-of-state, they're almost the same, except your out-of-state people say it's all about geographic distance. Now, what's one thing we know for sure about everybody who's checked that I don't go to events because I'm out of state? every single one of those people attended the online event called Alumni Survey. It was an event. It took them 15 minutes to fill it out. They're wondering, is anybody going to pay attention? Am I going to hear about it? Carnegie Mellon looked at this same thing when we presented to them, and they have I think one of the sharper alumni guys in the country, a guy named Andy Shanley. He's now, I think, maybe head of advancement there now. But they were looking at this, and he said, and they all looked at it, they said, you know, we've always assumed Pittsburgh is our most active chapter. But if you actually just put all that aside and looked at the numbers, our most active chapter is Facebook and LinkedIn. And are we treating them with the same respect that we treat the Pittsburgh chapter? And I don't know the right answer to that, but I do know that you have to take your thinking away from, you've got to allow room for virtual events, for the fact that a lot of things happen in virtual space and not only in brick and mortar space. And I think that's what this is saying. Your folks are thinking, well, if it's not in brick and mortar, it doesn't really count. And not a lot of difference by error. And so the other question we ask is an interesting one, I think, and it goes to, we ask them simply, what did you do when you were on campus? And we don't really ask them because I'm trying to figure that out. Because I'm sure, you know, you're a university. Somebody on campus could probably dig around and find out how many people in 1980 were in intramurals, right? I mean, it's probably there somewhere. That's not what I'm trying to figure out. What I'm trying to say is, if I'm going to elevate alumni, if I'm going to take my association and show up on campus in a way that is maybe inspirational to my future alumni, where do I do it? And you do it where they remember being, which is intramurals, residence halls, professional career-related activities, and you can add to that honor society, community service, to see the young people much higher in community service. It's possible. I think you can make a reasonable argument that the most philanthropic people to ever step on your campus are standing on it today as students and have walked off. Because every school I look at, this is true. Community service is much higher. These folks have been doing community service since they were in grade school. And community service is just real-time philanthropy. But the difference is they're not interested in seeing, so you can't call those folks and say, we're building this building, can you give me $250? You know, who's been the most successful at anybody in getting young people to give? The two Barack Obama campaigns. And never once did they ever call anybody in their 20s and say, it's going to cost us $1 billion to elect this man president, can you give me $250? It was always targeted and it was in real space. If I've done community service my whole life, I get real-time feedback. If I do Habitat for Humanity, I get to see a house when it's done. I get to meet the family that's moving in. If I'm going to give money, I want to know how my money is going to make a difference. How I can participate in something that might matter. And why is that interesting here? Because these are the kind of programs. If you can find a way for support of those professional and career-related activities and our community service, where alumni association is more involved in that, those are real and I think tangible ways that you can get your 20 and 30-year-old alumni to say, hey, I want to participate in that. Because I understand that. If you're buying pizza for everybody who does a professional career-related activity and offering to get an alumnus who's graduated in the last 10 years in there to help talk to them about what it's like to be in the early stages of the career, there's an opportunity there. I was talking to the folks in career services earlier. You know, even something as simple as, we're going to do a career day. We've already told any alumnus who wears a badge that says, I'm an alumnus, is when they do that, they've agreed that you can talk to them about how they got from where you're standing to where they are. That they're there to help you understand that path. And I think those are the kind of things that young alumni would pay to help have. Because they can see that. They can see with a tangible benefit. So any of these things are good ways to plug in. Intramurals is always interesting. There's always a lot of opportunity There's a guy, John Valva at University of California, San Diego. What he did I thought was interesting is he set up a softball, an alumni softball team. And they played the winners of the intramural softball program. And he made a big event, he gave away stuff, and it made a lot of fun. A lot of people came, and there was free food and Cokes and stuff. And so it was a fun event for everybody. And what he did, though, is the folks, the alumni that he got to attend, he worked hard to get people who worked at companies that offer internships to UCSD. And he said, I don't expect you to meet somebody on a ball field and give them an internship to your company. But what you could work out with your company is if you give somebody a business card, that business card is a guaranteed right to participate in the interview process when the company's on campus. And you tell them, I think you're a sharp kid, and I think you'd be good at our company. Here's a card. We're going to be here in April, and so you can participate. So then his letter at the end, in the alumni magazine and the student magazine, was, it was another great year for alumni. We only lost by 40 runs, and there are 10 people that are going to be participating or 20 people, or whatever the number was, in intern interviews, because that's what happens when our alumni and our students get together. And it feeds all these things that both sides of that equation, I think, want to see.
Just a comment on that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to see that, because we in the Career Development Center feel often like it's like pulling teeth to get people to participate in programs and activities. And right now we are promoting the State University's job fair, and we cannot sign up from current students or soon-to-be graduates. We just can't get them to sign up. So that's an interesting maybe contradiction there.
Well, this says that they remember. I mean, a lot of people, and I don't know that this has career day, this is a broader spectrum. That's professional career-related activity. So maybe you go back the other way. You get alumni, the association, to help you just plug in if they're in those clubs. I mean, I don't know if those clubs are happening, but I got to believe if that many people check that box, there's an accounting club and an aviation club and an engineering club and a calculus club, and where they get together and they do stuff, and maybe not out of here, but you could get the alumni and maybe some student volunteers to start supporting that effort. And then after that, then it maybe rolls into the other. I don't know, but yeah, it's hard to get people to participate. This says they remember doing something from professional career activity. Doesn't mean that they remember doing career.
Sure.
So it's a broader. There's a lot of things that could fall, and a lot of those people are also could be your ed folks, who definitionally are going to do a career-related thing as part of the program. They have to do an internship. So they're all going to check that box too. So as you think about it, you have to think from a Covey perspective. How do I tell somebody that they're important? One of the first things that I do is ask their opinion. And then when they start answering, I don't tie my shoe, I don't walk off, I look them in the eye and at least pretend like I'm paying attention. And that's why we spent time with Vicki and her folks making sure that the survey looked good. And then, what's interpersonal skills 101, what's the next thing that I do? Rephrase it and give it back to them. What I heard you say is, so I'm going to prove to you that what you said was important enough for me to, like one of the questions in the survey, this is an easy way to do that that's not just directly, I heard. One of the questions in the survey is open-ended. Tell us about somebody, some person or program that made a big difference to you while you were a student, and tell us a little about it. You have a lot of people filled that in, about a lot of professors and staff on campus. So one of the things they're thinking about doing is maybe in the magazine, you'll have a section next to class notes that has a quote about a couple of professors from each decade. So that's something about letting the professors know that it matters, because that relationship with faculty is so important. And it's also about letting the students know. And then what's even more important than what I heard you say is, look at me, I'm behaving differently because what you said matters that much to me. And finally, we're going to ask you again. So in terms of action items from my perspective, and I'm sure you'll come up with other ones, but the lowest hanging fruit is feedback. What I heard you say is, in many different modes as you can. The more that your alumni believe that somebody paid attention to what they had to say, the more it's going to matter to them, the more likely they are to fill out the next surveys. Increase the brand on campus in professional career-related activities, intramurals, residence halls, honor society. Those are great places for the association to be supportive, for alumni to show up. Also elevate the profile of those alumni who are guest lecturing on campus. From a talking point standpoint, clearly those correlations, I think, drive the day. They want to know how that degree prepared them for their lives. They want to hear stories of that. I think any affirmation of that is probably always going to be good for you. In terms of equity of degree, what things matter to me, impact me about the degree. It's about scholarships, accomplishments of students. And then what they want to see is more, better, different today than back in there. Remember, it's young people, mostly. So you want to say, in 2010, in 2003, 4, 5, 6, we've improved from them in how we do skills training for a career. It's not just that it's better than it was in 1980. It's better than it was 10 years ago. And here are things that we're doing. So to the extent that's true, you want to talk about it in skills training for career, lessons about academics and classes, exposure to new things. Look for those opportunities at events where somebody says something important happened to them, because I think that's the communication after the event, probably as important as the event. And finally, the more these data are used, and just a second, I'll tell I did a project with University of San Diego, which is a Catholic school in San Diego. A trustee set up the project. The guy called me and said, "Hi, my name's Jamie Powers, and I'm on a trustee here at the University of San Diego. We want you to do a study, and I found your name, and tell me a little bit about what you do." I started explaining about how we run a survey, and he said, "Well, stop. He said, let me just, for full disclosure, my name is Jamie D. Powers, and I'm the J.D. Powers grandson who ran the company when we sold it, so I get it about surveys. I don't need to hear that part, but I would like to hear about what you're doing." And we did the project, and what was interesting, the reason I bring it up, is when I presented the results like this, and he didn't really have much involvement in that, but at the end, he would get up. And I presented it 4 or 5 times at the University of San Diego. He got up after each one, and he said, I ran J.D. Powers for years, and we had an opportunity in that time to work with world-class companies and not so world-class companies all over the place. And he said, one of the things that I can tell you we could tell early as to which was which, and the way we could tell is if I came back to a company for the second time, or 6 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years later, and that data, that customer data that we accumulated for them the first time, was sitting in some quality office and people were making charts and graphs from it, but it wasn't really out in the company. Those were companies that tended not to go as far. He said the companies that were really world-class, that data was everywhere. People used it, people thought about it, people worried about it. It got integrated into the institution, and he said, I'm just employing my alma mater to be more like those latter companies than the former. So I think the more that you can share this data, the better. It's nice that we have the video, and I think we're going to find some other ways to kind of push it out. But there's probably let me ask, so how many of you all, sometime in the last 6 months, have had some interaction with an alumnus or an alum? So almost 100%. And we could have these seats full with people on campus, and it would be the same. So alumni is everybody's business. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's engaging, everybody's talking to alumni about what's going on. So the more that you understand, develop, think about what those cohorts are, how we develop messages for those cohorts, the more impact you're going to have as a whole institution. So that's the gist of it. Thank you all for coming. We do have time for questions if you have any. It's a little bit of information by fire hose. I apologize for that. There's a lot here. So sometimes people don't, but be happy to talk about anything, and if you have any questions or thoughts, surprises. No takers? From a student standpoint, so you're currently a student or, yeah, graduate student, anything sort of strike you from a student perspective of, yeah, it'd be nice if alumni did that, or